Hey y'all, I'm Celeste Sowder. I am the author of an upcoming memoir called I'm Here But I'm Late. I'm also the founder of the Soul Sister Project. And today, Kim and I have a conversation about resilience. We talk about faith. We talk about when I lost the grip of my white knuckled sanity and how I gained redemption. And it's been an amazing time with Kim, and I hope you stick around for the end or until the end.
Welcome to the show. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm a writer, I'm a speaker. I do lots of fun things in life. And one of the best, most joyful things that I do is I get to have great conversations with incredible people like today, Celeste Sowder, that I think by the end of the day, we might be good friends. We might be best friends. We might have to just get together and spend a weekend together. I feel this immediate connection. And so I am so pleased to introduce you to Celeste. She's been through so much in life, like a lot of us have, right? Like we go through stuff, but it's always nice to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that you don't have to stay in the down, but that there's an up again. You don't have to stay in the valley. You can get right back up on that mountaintop. And so Celeste is going to talk about so many things, a lot of things that pertain to women. Men, you're welcome to listen, but ladies, you're going to really enjoy Celeste. Celeste, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I am so happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm so thrilled that you're here. I love the pink.
Thank
Love
you.
the pink. You look great. Love your background. Love everything about you. And you just have this joy that sort of surrounds you. And I know that life wasn't always like that for you, but I'm curious if we kind of start a little bit back farther. Tell me about 8-year-old Celeste.
Okay. Well, 8-year-old Celeste. There's not a lot about 8-year-old Celeste that I remember other than, well, I guess, we had started a new school and I had gone from like going to a private school into a public school. And that year too, it's funny that you even ask about 8-year-old Celeste. That year we kind of moved in with my dad actually in that neighborhood to go to that public school while my mom and my stepdad actually were like buying a house in the neighborhood. But because it wasn't in the same area, I stayed with my dad that year. And that was my third grade year. And then when I was 9, my world shattered, actually. It
Wow.
absolutely did. And so, yeah, we'll go there.
Yeah,
So
go for
when
it.
I was 9, yeah, my dad, he sat us down and told us that he was homosexual. And so it was 1992, Kim. And let's just paint a picture of 1992. There was not a lot of grace. There was not a lot of mercy, and there was not a lot of love towards the homosexual community. And I recognized that at 9. I knew enough to know that, right? And like what I heard was he was choosing death because of the AIDS pandemic and things like that. And so my world absolutely, like, I think my mind actually shattered. I actually talk about this in my book, my upcoming memoir, and where it just kind of shattered this facade that I had been living, and my identity and all of it just shifted. And I didn't know. I just didn't know. I didn't know what to think, what to believe, who to be. And with being an undiagnosed ADHD female also in the 90s, we like to know our boundaries, right? And we mask. And so it was a really it was it was really hard to come to grips with it, and then we didn't talk about it. And so it was like, okay, we're done. We've had the conversation, and then we're going to move on from here. And so there was no talking about it, and I was a very confused little girl. And so yeah.
I would imagine 9 years old. I mean, that's big news for anyone at 9 years old, right? I
Yeah.
mean, certainly praise the Lord, more and more people are just embracing people and it does not matter. And you're born how you're born and be who you're
Yes.
created to be you. And it's a wonderful thing that we're coming into this world that more and more
Thankful for that.
we're
Yeah.
giving grace and just saying, be who you're created to be, just be you. But when in 1992 and you're nine years old, to wrap a
Yeah.
9-year-old brain around that had to be so difficult. And it's kind of interesting. Is that why your parents divorced? Did you find out?
So, that it could have been. I was still very young when they divorced. I don't even know if I was 2 years old yet. And when I asked my mom about it, she knew before they got married, but went ahead with the marriage because, well, we didn't talk about it and we didn't have social media and there wasn't like, and so it was kind of he might be having a phase, like kind of thing. And so they stayed together for a good while, 6, 8 years, and it just became unbearable. And they just didn't, yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened, but I think that might have been a factor.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that is a lot to take in. And then how
Yeah.
do you're 9 years old, you're going to run to your next door neighbor, best friend and say, oh my gosh, by the way, my dad's gay. That had to be
Yeah,
difficult because who do you talk to about it?
exactly. And I think too, that's where that internalized shame kind of took root in me. And I actually do talk about that too, where, I was split. There was a split, there was this church going family that I lived with, right? And we went to church, but we didn't talk about God after Sunday either. So there was that too. And so I was confused about that. And then I had another family that we acceptance and love were the same thing, and you had to be acceptable to be lovable, and there was these like really weird rules over there too. And then we were like he was an activist in this culture and community also, and so there was a really big split into what was right and wrong, and I had to kind of just go figure that out for myself. And it took me a good while. It took me a really good while. I feel like really, truly like this year, I'm like, hey, I'm here. And so
Yeah.
I might be a little late, but I'm here. I'm 42 or I will
Yeah.
be in a couple of weeks. So
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah. Yeah. What an interesting thing to face as a kid, to deal with and then wrap your mind around. I grew up Catholic. And so God has always been a part of my life. And, there's lots of people that I've run across over the years that are like, are Catholics Christians? Yes. I can
yes.
tell you 100%, of course, Catholics are Christians. And I love Jesus from when I can remember. And loved being in church, loved the smell of incense, loved, whatever, all the things
Yeah.
about it. And but I questioned things. There were some things that I questioned that were taught in the church. And one thing about the Catholic Church is I never ever heard a priest talk about any other religion in a negative way, ever, ever.
Right.
I'd go to the Baptist church with my grandma and grandpa. They'd bring the little Catholic girl, and the pastor would talk about how bad Catholics are and they're all going to hell. But the Catholic Church never talked bad about people.
Mm,
I don't remember anything about even
yeah.
like anything about homosexuality, anything about anything else. I mean, it was just all from the Word of God was the sermon every Sunday. And so, none of the other stuff kind of played into it, which I appreciate too about the Catholic Church. But I then went to an Assembly of God for a lot of years, and then I went to a non-denominational, and then people. Our pastor never preached about homosexuality, but there
Yeah.
was certainly talk about, oh gosh, it's an abomination. People are going to hell and whatever. And I always thought, Lord Jesus, I just cannot believe that you're going to just condemn people to hell because of who they are. Like that didn't make any sense to me. And so I really struggled with that as a whole in the church. Like, how do we tell people how do we decide who's going to hell? And then how do we tell people they're going to hell because they're living who God created them to be? And how do we not give God the power to create people however he wants to create people, right? And
Yeah.
and take a deeper dive into what does the Bible really say, because it's so messed up what people interpret right out of 3 verses in the
Yeah.
Bible or something. But so anyway, so it sounds like you were the same. Like you had these questions, I imagine. Like,
Yeah. I had a lot of different questions, and and so, the internalized, well, I was confused about God's character from a lot of different conflicting messages, right? And it sounds like you experienced a little bit of that too, right? And then I was confused about his character, but I was also then like, what is love? And I remember, well, there's a couple of things that when you were talking that came up for me. So I grew up in the Methodist church, and my dad actually came out to us in a Methodist church. And we were the reason that that church actually adopted PFLAG, which is still there. And it's a organization that helps homosexuals. Well, now it's the LGBTQ plus community, but it helps them and their families to find that love, that what does unconditional love look like. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't until probably like 2 years ago that God was like really showing me what unconditional love is. I'm sure he was up to that, but I didn't hear the message until, I was like, oh, it means, so that he was showing me that loving unconditional is not a blanket term. It's not this like this all encompassing one and done kind of thing. Like, oh, I love Jesus, so I love everybody. That's really hard. And we fail at that. And when I was learning to not internalize this shame when I would fail, God was showing me that loving unconditional is actually loving without condition in that moment. And so, and if only I could go back and explain these things to 9-year-old Celeste, right? Because I felt that in order to be acceptable in one house, I couldn't accept one parent. And then on the other hand, in order to be acceptable and lovable in the other house, I couldn't accept the other parent. And so I was really split on what parental love, what unconditional love, all of this stuff was. But I think it's really amazing that we are part of that legacy of bringing that to the community at large. Even though, I mean, as a 9-year-old kid, I wasn't an activist in it or anything like that, but that warmed my heart once I recognized that when I was doing some research for my memoir. And then too, it's, God's character is so different than what we even imagine it to be. But when you really start digging into the Bible, I did not recognize. So, we've gone kind of back and forth. We've talked about this, like this, my dad and the kind of growing up, but it led me to 40 years old, and I'm standing there and I'm having a mental breakdown. Don't even know I'm having one, right? Because of this internalized shame. It was a hormonal imbalance. I'd lost 100 pounds in less than a year. Like there was just a lot of things going on. I was menopausal. There was a lot of things, but this internalized shame, when I started recognizing that shame in my mind, my head, my whatever, like shame had such a grip on me that I would actually read the Bible. I would read the Bible with the lens of shame. And so God's character wasn't coming through because I was seeing him as a shaming God. And what he showed me was that in Genesis, the byproduct of sin was shame. That separation, as soon as Adam and Eve disobeyed, the byproduct of sin was shame, and it separated them from God. And the next thing was in Hebrew, that where are you, when God asked that question, where are you, Adam? It really is actually translated to what condition are you in? Meaning God's heart was breaking. It was breaking. They were meant for communion. They were meant for community. And that instant separation, shame took hold. And that all of these things combined, as I'm like going through my mental stuff and like trying to sift through 40 years of internalized stuff, but ADHD diagnosis on top of it, like all of this came, and I started seeing God through a different lens, and it changed my life. It really did. So
Yeah.
he changed my life, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting Because I think, it can be easy when you're a kid, especially and you're hearing things, to think of God as intimidating and this fire and brimstone God who's going to smite you, at any moment, like you better be good, but don't disobey kind of thing. And then come into a realization that, John says God is love.
Mm-hmm.
Not that God loves, but God is love.
Is.
God is
Yeah.
love. And we're created in his image. So love is something we are. We're love.
Mhm.
And so, it's not a feeling, it's not anything else. It's a who we are. So how
Yeah,
we walk it, talk it, breathe it, live it, give it is entirely on us. But it's who we are. It's who we're created to be, because we're created in his image. And so walking love is entirely different than worrying about being smited or living in the shame of the past or living in the shame of somebody else's life. It's
yeah,
interesting, right? That we take on other people's shame when they might not even have their own shame, but we take it on for them. And which is, you kind of look at it and you go, wow, why would I ever do that? But it's so easy to do. It's so
it is.
common and so easy to do. So
It is.
how'd you get rid of shame? Like how did you package it and throw it in the ocean?
Yeah, I wish that it was that easy, right? That it could just be that I recognized it and I was done with it. I will say that it's a familiar spirit for me, and so it does still crop up some. I just actually experienced it again just maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. But going back to actually recognizing it, so I'm going to throw out a name of a book if that's okay.
Oh, yes.
So Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
So
In
good.
the midst of my mental breakdown, and I keep calling it that because I want listeners to understand, like, I was seriously in a psychosis, but it was actually a mental breakthrough that I was having. These things were just falling off of me. And in the midst of this, it was a 6 month long psychosis. In the midst of that, I just clung to the hem of Jesus's garment. Like, I just clung. I was in so much isolation. I had been ostracized from ministries and all kinds of stuff at that point. And I just clung to him, but I couldn't get out of my head. And so I would listen to podcasts, books, music. Well, I didn't listen to a lot of music, but podcasts, books, all these things. And I listened to Daring Greatly, and it absolutely changed my life. I had never heard anything about shame. Like, it wasn't, we sing the songs, like, I don't even remember. I think there's a Zach Williams or something like that. Is that who it is? Anyways, where it's like shame has no hold on me or grip on me or whatever. And we sing those things, but do we believe them? I don't know. I didn't know what shame was, really. And I didn't know it had such a hold on me. And so I'm standing there, I'm listening to Brene Brown, and I've just got this diagnosis. Then a day after my 41st birthday, I get the blood results back, and my thyroid is like, my TSH, my pituitary gland was a zilch. It was 0.03, okay, on like blood levels. And I don't remember what normal is, but I think it's like 4. So I was like at 0%. And my mind was just absolutely whatever. And when I started coming to, when I started, like, my hormones started coming to, and my mind started kind of coming back online, is what I call it. My nervous system would recognize shame. I don't know even how to even put it better than that, is that my body would have a physical reaction to when shame would try to get a grip on me, or I would try to come into shame, or I was shaming someone, because it is very deeply ingrained in our society and our homes and stuff like that. We use it for behavioral modification. There's all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, I just, as I was walking through the healing process, I recognized my mental state and my physical state kind of coexisted, but I didn't know that until I started recognizing patterns. I also got medicated for my undiagnosed ADHD. So it was literally like my amygdala, all this fear and all these emotions and the frontal lobe were not having conversations for my entire life. And then all of a sudden they're having conversations and I can like recognize these patterns in my life. And so that was really, I know that this is a lot, but that was really how all of that came about. Daring greatly, recognizing shame, the physical sensation of it. And now it's when I recognize that, I literally just cannot come into agreement with it. So my husband, he's so good. There are times where I'm like, I know this is not what you meant, but this is what I heard, and I'm not going to hold on to this. I'm not going to let it fester. So here is this, and I will like word vomit at him what's in my brain happening, right? So that shame doesn't take root anymore. And so that's kind of, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, no, but it's so good. It's so good. So you had a pile of things. It wasn't
A
just
pile.
one thing going on in life, but you had this pile that you were trying to get out from under and figure out what to keep and what to throw away, right?
Yeah.
Like, physically you had stuff going on, mentally you had stuff going on, spiritually you had stuff going on, like all of this stuff all at the same time, which probably, intertwine some, they're not just exclusive to each other, but they combine with each other and melt together somehow. And, it had to be such a hard time. Looking back, maybe you're grateful for it. Maybe you're not at a point of being grateful for it yet, but hopefully someday you'll get to a point where you go, it's okay that I went through the hardest of the hard because this is where I am today and this is how I can help people today. But I always thought, what happened, Celeste? What happened to nervous breakdowns? Women used to be able to have a nervous breakdown and go away for a while. And you remember those days, like in the 50s? I don't
Yeah.
know, you see it on TV sometimes, or I don't know. And I always thought, well, if I ever had a nervous breakdown, I'd like to go to Hawaii. Like that's where I would want to
That would be
recover.
lovely.
Yeah, wouldn't that be lovely?
Yes.
But it's like we don't have that opportunity anymore. We have to bear it through life, through getting up every day and doing the thing every day and cooking the meals or whatever it is, going to work, whatever is we're doing. And your husband's a farmer. That's not an
Yes.
easy life. That's a taxing life. And so you had to get out of bed each morning and figure out what you were going to do next. You didn't get to go sit on the beach in Hawaii. And
No.
so good for you for recognizing things and getting through. I happen to also be ADHD and was
Love that.
diagnosed later in life. I know, isn't it crazy? And it's kind of funny because some people think, oh, everyone's being diagnosed now. It's whatever, whatever. Well, it's true. There's a lot more diagnoses because there's a lot more known about it. Not
Yes.
that people are just being diagnosed willy-nilly, but it's because you truly are.
Praise
And
God, though, that we are getting some diagnosis for the ones that, like us, right? Because, and it really bothers me when people are like this ADHD world and like, everybody's attention span and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know about you, but for me, it explained everything that I thought was wrong with me. And what I was trying not to be was exactly who God made me to be.
mhm. Yes, yeah, so true. And I didn't recognize it in myself. I had friends who said, Kim, you got to get tested. Like you, and I was like, what? Like, what am I doing wrong? What is it that you see in me? And then I did go get tested and you had to bring a friend. It was quite a process, hours and hours of process. And they're interviewed and you're interviewed and all the stuff,
As a
right?
process.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
then, yes, it's like I look at it in a way as a blessing because I've been in business my whole life and it can be an asset
It can
to
be.
the ADHD. There
Yes.
can be some good stuff that comes out of it. Unfortunately, I think I used the good and then unfortunately I ignored the bad, or whatever, the things that could change. Maybe bad's not a good word, but things that could change. And so, yeah, there is a difference when you get diagnosed, you realize what you're dealing with, you figure it out. There's great medication for it. I got to
Yeah.
say that just changes the way your brain connects, and yeah, it can be the answer to all that you wondered about all these years, like, why is my brain seem so different than others?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really what I experienced is the medication. And then it was like all of a sudden, I mean, like, I like literally just woke up. I don't know if that's what happened with you, but it was just like, I think I might be brilliant. I mean, for real, it was like I'd been shaming myself all my entire life, and then all of a sudden, all these things that I had hyper focused on and actually like took the time to learn and things like that, it was like they all clicked all of a sudden. So all these like experiences, all these years, decade. I mean, like it was probably a dozen years I had been trying to make sense of why I felt so called to social media, why I love technology, how I can make this all work, who was actually coming to me. Like there was things that just didn't make sense or they just didn't click until, yep, here I was, and I was medicated, and my mind was working, and I was doing the mental work too. Like I was absolutely putting in the time in the word. I was doing I did a podcast almost every single day from January 8th until like October this year. And I healed out loud.
Mm.
And it just, and then I would listen to myself. And that's something that they don't talk about much, but that rewires the brain more than anything, is to actually listen to yourself say the things you need to hear. It's a
Mm.
really amazing thing. And it actually rewires your brain. And so God told me, press live on January 8th. I pressed live. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what it looked like. I barely had any kind of even idea of a business at that point. I was just like, I had surrendered it all. And by February, I was launching something that I'd been like really wanting to launch for about 3 years at that point. I was launching by February, and then I've done several different launches through the year. And then, but it was just pressing live and
Mm.
healing out loud and then listening to it. And it was just, it's God. It was only, that's all I can say, is that it was him. But the ADHD diagnosis answered so many questions for me. And it also gave me the ability to learn to love myself, the real me, instead
Mm.
of trying to be something or someone that I'm not, or I was told who I was. I
Yes.
think that
Oh,
makes
yeah, yeah.
sense, right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's amazing to me. Like I believe that when we're born, we love ourselves and appreciate ourselves. Like because nobody has said anything about us that's bad. Nobody's told us that we're bad at this or bad at that or bad when we do this or this is wrong and that's wrong. And it's people saying those things that changes how we feel about ourselves. And it shouldn't. It'd be nice if it didn't, but it does, especially when you're young and super impressionable. That's okay. It changes things, right? Like it changes how you feel about yourself. It changes how think about yourself. And it can take a while to undo all those things that were told to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was 41. Yeah. Sitting there, and I was like, I was having to relearn who I am. I still am relearning myself. There was, I haven't made a ton of reels this year. I've really felt, so I do help. Like I am called to social media, but last year I did a lot of reels with what's called B-roll. And so it would be, things of like my life and things like that. And I would just put words on the video. And one of them, I remember just being so heartbroken. I was in such a heartbroken place. I had just put my oldest on the airplane to California. She's 21. She's 21 today, actually. I just put my oldest on the airplane to California. She was, moving from Texas to California. I didn't know what that season looked like. I didn't know if we were like releasing her for good or whatever. So that identity was shifting, and it had been for about a year. Uh, there was ministry that I was doing and then I wasn't doing, and I wasn't a part of it anymore. And we called ourselves family, but they weren't. And there was just like all these identity shifts. And I was walking through this like twinkly light arch at a corn maze. And it was so magical and so beautiful. And I was so heartbroken of all the circumstances around me that I couldn't control, all these surrendering moments. And I remember taking that video, and then on that reel, it was like, I don't even know who I am. Like, I really just do not know who I am. 2023, this is like the, hard year. It was so hard. And like the foundation of who I was shifted so much. But I'm so glad it did. We had talked about that. I am so thankful for what I would call like my dark night of my soul. I am so thankful for that, because it did. It shook up the ground of my traditions, my religion, who I thought I was, who I thought God was. It shook up all of that ground. And it gave me it gave me a starting place with just knowing who I am. And because I didn't know that from childhood or anything like that. And yeah, identity, you hear it all the time. You get your identity from above and all these things, but that does not make sense when you are confused. It doesn't make sense. So I was always looking for that external validation. And wow, I don't know. God's been really like this year has been something else. That's for sure. And I have learned who I am a little bit more. So
Yeah, it's interesting because it takes some time to figure out who you are, to figure out who you're not, who people have told you that you are, but you really aren't that.
Yeah.
And who, what box you feel like you're supposed to fit in, and realize that that's not even your box. Like you don't even belong there, right?
Yeah, I've busted out of the box.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and it can be really hard, and it would be wonderful if it were just so simple as, our identity only comes from God. Like, don't listen to the world. Don't listen to people saying things to you that are going to bring you down, that are going to, get into your soul. But the reality of that is tough, because it's awfully hard to not care at all what people think. I think the older you get, or I have found the older I get, like when I was approaching 60, I was like, oh my gosh, 60. Oh, that's so old. I can't believe I'm going to be that old. And so yeah. So I just was kind of dreading it. And I thought, oh my gosh, my grandma was so old when she was 60. Am I going to be this? Oh, how do I get there? And then I thought, when you're 60, I heard somebody say this recently, and I think this is kind of puts it into some good words. When you're 20, you care what everybody thinks about you. When you're 40, you stop caring what people think about you. When you're 60, you realize nobody's thinking about you. Right?
This is true, right?
Yeah. So you get older, get to 60. I feel like I can wear whatever I want. I can say what I want. I can do what I want. And, if nobody likes it, I don't care so much. I really kind of don't. It's nice to get to a point where I'm not here to please anybody. I want to live a life that encourages other people, that helps other people. I want to love deeply. I want to live love fully. I want to do all those things. But at the same time, if somebody doesn't like me, they don't like me. I'm not everybody's cup of tea,
Yeah, me
you
neither.
know?
I get that.
And so
Yeah.
I don't have to be liked by everybody. And I'd like to be loved by everybody. That would be wonderful if everybody just loved each other. But not everybody's going to like me, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
so, I live my life the way I live it. And in my 60s, I get to do that. I feel more freedom for whatever reason to do that. And it'd be nice if that would have happened in my 20s, perhaps, or
Right. I
sooner,
know. I
right?
would have been unstoppable in the 20, like in my 20s if that would have happened. But yeah, I love that too. And I feel too that, we come to a place you're talking about like we just nobody is thinking about me. I get to do this and I get to live my life. But I think too, we come to a place where we have that decision. Do we choose life? Like real life, like life with him, audience of one, the adventure of following God, because it is an adventure, or do we start dying? Do we start living or do we start dying? And I had that moment too this year. Well, it was, I guess, whatever. It's been a year or so. But I had that moment where I had to make that decision. Do I start living or do I start dying? And I chose life because I didn't want to die. My dad died at 55. I didn't want to die. Like I was like, no, I don't want that. I've seen it. I don't want it. And so I chose life. And it's been, yeah, living love. And it's been living with the adventure. And even when I, started pressing live and started the healing out loud and stuff, even at that point, I don't know if I'd actually walk through the the valley of the shadow of death yet. At that point, there was some time in the mental psychosis, but I was so far removed, I don't remember a lot of it. So it was actually the healing that's the hardest. And what God was showing me, in Psalms 23, it says, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil. In the Passion Translation, it says, fear has no hold of me because you have. Anyways, when we were studying this in one of my studies online this year, it says, let's see, hold on. Fear will never conquer me, for you already have. Uh, so I'm a visionary. I think, I had told you that when we first met, and I had this vision of Psalm 23 and the valley of the shadow of, like the deepest darkness is what it's called in here. And yeah, the valley of deepest darkness in the Passion Translation. But he gave me this vision of me literally putting my forehead to his shoulder blades, like I was in a haunted house, grabbed onto it like his robe, and all I could see was basically where his feet were taking me. And I just kept my forehead to his shoulder blades and like kept walking in the valley of the deepest darkness. And that was my healing. And the healing is hard. When you choose life, that healing is hard, but it's so worth it. And so, yeah, forehead to the shoulder blades, walking. Up to that point, anytime that it was time to step into a new season, a new healing, a new whatever, right, in life, I would be looking all around for a way out of that discomfort when we walk through those seasons. I've used everything. Like my story is very, like, I used everything in my power to try to not be like uncomfortable in life. Alcohol. Yeah, I started smoking at 10, like all these things, okay? And it was this season, it was this year, forehead to the shoulder blades, just taking the steps he ordered in front of me. Um, and not looking for a way out, just following him. And it made all the difference. And the adventure that I've had and that I know I'm on is incomparable to anything that like my wildest imagination could have drummed up. Like it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool. I love that imagery, the forehead to the shoulder blades. I love that because it's clinging, it's just clinging on and having
Yeah.
faith that his feet are going in the right direction. So if you
He
follow,
knows the way.
he knows the way. Go figure. He knows the way. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's other women that are going through
Yeah.
part of what you, maybe all of what you went through in that season or part of it. If looking back, if someone were to have given you a piece of advice, or if there was something you wish you would have known in the middle of it, what would that be? Or what advice would you give women who are in the middle of something right now?
So I call it my white knuckled sanity. I lost the grip of my white knuckled sanity. I was taught that meant, well, and I think a lot of us, it's so taboo to actually admit that we are struggling. It is so taboo, especially for, and I don't know about men. I'm sure that they have their own things too, but it feels like as wives, mothers, all these like titles, these things that we do, and it feels like we have to keep doing them because the world would fall apart if we didn't. Um, if you're at a place where you just absolutely know that something is going on, that you're not okay, please ask for help. I went 6 months, 6 months before reaching out for help. And it was one blood test and a psychological evaluation away from like healing, or at least the start of my healing. The spiritual healing happened afterwards, but the physical healing, my brain, all of those like things, like I could have not experienced all of what I was experiencing if I had asked for help. And it wasn't out of pride. It probably kind of was, the pride of trying to keep it together. But I thought I was in the wrong. I thought I had done all the wrong things. I sifted through why I'd been ostracized for 6 months, trying to find where I went wrong. That's internalized shame. And if anything, if I can shorten anybody's mental health crisis by just calling out the shame and telling them to fight for themselves, like my job here is done. God has better for you. You are worthy and you have purpose and you are loved and you can be love. You really, truly can. But with internalized shame, it's hard to see all of that because it is the driving force. Once you remove that, man, you see things in totally different light.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like all of a sudden color comes around again, right? Get out of the
Yes.
black and white world. And then, then the sky can be the limit for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about that with purpose. So often we reach different times in life. And one of them is probably when you become an empty nester, right? You've worked all these years raising your kids and you've been running here and there and going to all their stuff. And then whatever. And then they move to California, which I'm
Yeah.
sure probably like me, you had her write something when she was 4 years old, swore she'd never move more than 2 miles away. But no, they do. They move away. And so, empty nester is one of those times in life that can be a crisis time
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, okay, I had these titles, and those titles are kind of gone. So where is it that I am now? What is my purpose? I thought I knew
Yeah.
my purpose, but that purpose is gone. And I really think purpose comes down to being truly, completely who you're created to be. That's your purpose.
Yes.
That is your purpose. Like,
I agree.
people will look and go, well, my purpose is, business. My purpose is family. My purpose is whatever people believe their purpose is. I'm sure it's all those things, but really it comes down to being who you're created to be, embracing that, loving that, because until you really love yourself and can see the value in yourself, it's awfully hard to be loved to other people.
This is true. Yes, absolutely. It really truly is. And the thing is yes, my purpose right now is going to shift and change because my story changes. Because I think purpose and story go hand in hand, right? I have a passion and a purpose right now that like we need to uncover this shame that is it is literally eating people alive. It's killing people. I know my dad like he slowly died because of internalized shame, like it's it's something that we don't talk about. um and that is part of my purpose, and I probably will go to the grave talking about it because I just can't not see it now. But our story is part of it. But yes, it is that intricate being that he created us to be. I call it God's love thought, his squishy love thought that's inside of here. That love thought that he knew before the foundation of the earth, right? That is me. This body, my story even, those things can be used because of that one creative thought that he even, the gifts that he imparted on you are not the same gifts he imparted on me. You're a miracle just as much as I am. It's scientifically proven we're each miracles, right? And it's this love thought that he placed inside of me, and the story that followed, because there were things that he didn't want to happen that happened because of people's choices, right? But he can take all of that and use it for good. And it's because of that love thought, that squishy love thought. And when we are introduced to that, that's when everything starts lining up. And so yeah, like best friends, definitely. Speaking the same language.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I have such a passion that I just have such a passion that people have been so consumed with trying to get external validation from man that I'm like, you have no idea. Like, he's so cool. He's so cool and he loves you so much and he has an adventure for you, and your story does matter and it can be used for good, and you're not a victim of your circumstances. Quit looking at your circumstances, start looking up. And I just, yeah, anyways.
Yeah, so true. It's just all so true. And it can start at any moment too. I think it can
Yes.
be easy to go, gosh, I've wasted years or I've wasted time or at my age, what can I do now or how can I change things? And the reality is you can. The reality is that it might be interesting to go to Christmas dinner and all of a sudden you have this whole different attitude about yourself and what you'll allow to be taken in and what you no longer will allow to be taken in. And so you can seem like this different person coming into the family, and they might go, who is this lady? And what did you do with my sister, or whatever. But that comes back to shame too, right? That comes back to allowing other people to dictate who you are. So change as much as you want to change. My God, we
Yes.
got a lot of years to live. Like, I hope I'm doing life better now than I did in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, right? Like you hope that you're evolving and growing and doing things better. I've often thought, Celeste, like there's books on baby infants, even before they're born, right? How to what to expect when you're expecting, right? And then all these books on toddlers and even adolescents, teens, and then it kind of stops. But there should be a book for how to get through your 20s, right? And your 30s, because it's different than your 20s, and your 40s, because it's different than your 30s and your 20s. And it changes. We get to do that. We get to grow. We don't have to stay stuck in what we
Praise
thought we
God.
were, but we get to keep expanding our world and realize there's so much more. And God has such big plans for us if we just embrace them. And
Yes,
yeah, and and feel like we can change.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
as we
So
do, we need to give other people the grace to change,
this is
right?
true. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that God showed me this year. talking about change and growing and things like that, is that the messy middle. Have you heard this? So, Jesus says, love God, love others. Those are like the two greatest commandments, but we forget the messy middle. See, it's love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and spirit. We can't love God with all our heart, mind, soul, spirit until we actually understand that he loves us. See, we have to actually like be loved. And it's really hard to make the choice to be loved because it's a choice. And so I actually kind of told you about like a vision I'd had. He had given me a vision of getting into a waterfall. And I chose to sit on the rock and like observe the waterfall. And he's like, get in the waterfall. You've been observing my love for all these years. It's beautiful. Yeah. You haven't experienced it. I hadn't allowed him to love me. And it was in the loving me that I learned to love myself, the messy middle. See, to love God and to love others, we have to know how to love ourselves and go on that adventure and trust him and start trusting ourselves too. There's a trust there too that has to be gained. And then another thing is the resilience part of it is when you do learn who you are, and that resilience is actually a physics term that it means to bounce off like animal tissue, honestly, animal tissue, and that tissue will remain the same, like it will bounce back to its original state. And what he was showing me is that I hadn't learned resilience. And so I was internalizing all these identities, what everybody else said. I was like, I was internalizing everything. And in learning resilience, I actually experienced love and loving myself. But on the other side of that is joy, because you learn who you are by letting things bounce off of you and not internalizing them and looking to him, right, for that validation. And so, yeah, it's been a really amazing year.
That is so good. That's so good. Everything that you're saying, oh my gosh, we could talk for hours. I want to know, I'm curious because when you change, things around you change, right? And sometimes it means your friends change, and
Yeah.
sometimes it means other relationships change. And I'm curious, you started out with my husband, he's a great guy, whatever, he's such a great guy. How has your relationship with your husband and your kids changed?
So, well, it's funny because my husband is an amazing man. This year was really hard on him too. His mother got diagnosed with cancer. We almost had to file bankruptcy because the farm it was a really hard year. 2024 was hard. In June, I actually asked for a divorce, and it was a wake up call that he needed because he had started internalizing everything too and not looking to his relationship with the Lord. And I had been pursuing the Lord. We had become unequally yoked. And it was, and it wasn't done out of manipulation. And I was heartbroken when I did it. But I was like, I can't do what God's calling me to do. And then also be your Holy Spirit. I can't do it. But he took that opportunity and ran to the feet of Jesus, and like, amazing how much healing has happened in my husband's life, and how we can heal together now. My daughters are absolutely amazing, right? They're learning to heal now rather than internalize everything that they're experiencing and having to have a mental breakdown at 40. I am walking them through recognizing the shame, and they're starting to do it themselves. And as I pursue the things that God's put on my heart, they're amazed at what's happening and unfolding. And that's the greatest gift we can give them, is being a witness, just a witness to what God can do when you surrender it all. And so that's kind of what I've given it to him when it comes to my children. My 21-year-old, she's struggling a bit with identity and who she is and finding her place in the world. But who didn't at 21? I had just barely had a baby at 21. I was struggling with identity too. So like, I'm not faulting her on that at all. And then I have a senior in high school. And so the world is like her oyster right now. And so I'm just trying to kind of keep them grounded, both in the seasons that they're in. And it's been fun and challenging, but we just want better for our kids than we had. And so I'm just looking, I have to really look to God so that, yeah, those cycles break.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Right. Right. Which is, yeah. I mean, I don't know what people do without faith. Uh, I can't imagine going through and feeling like you're just all alone. Like you're all alone. You got to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of support, and yeah, it can be so tough on every relationship you have. But it's beautiful where it sounds like you guys are now, you and your husband,
Yeah.
that you got even with that relationship to the lowest of the lows into the valley of the shadow of death, right?
Yes.
And now are in a different place. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. So there's healing that can happen. And there are times when you do have to walk away from relationships, maybe not marriages, but if you've got people in your life that are holding you back and bringing you down and not allowing you to be all that you can be, like trying to stop that from happening, it's okay to walk away from relationships
I've
that are
done that.
hurting you.
I've
Yeah.
done that this year too. So I
Yeah.
understand that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is an interesting thing to do. But
Yeah. It
but
is.
you got to kind of do what you got to do. So okay, so somebody's out there, they're going through a tough time right now. They're going through a tough time in their marriage, a tough time in life. What do you say to them?
So I struggle with words like this because when you're going through it, if you just throw like God's got this, Romans 8:28, he does all things. Everything's going to come, together for the good. And there's people grieving spouses, there's people grieving children, there's people walking through financial hardship. There's so much. And I don't ever want to just flippantly throw it out there like God's got this, you're good. You're good. What you just wait and see because it's hard to do that. What I would say is he can handle your anger. He can handle your anger. He can handle your heartbreak. Um, he wants to actually. See, he doesn't break your heart to mend it. And I think that that's another lie that we've always believed is that God provides these opportunities for faith to grow or whatever. But the thing is life does happen. What we consider life, death happens, things like that. God doesn't change. It's our perception of him that does. But that was one of the biggest lies was that he breaks hearts to mend them for me. Like I stayed heartbroken because God gave me these opportunities to be heartbroken. And that wasn't the case. And so I want to tell you basically, like if anybody is walking through it, if you're feeling shame, it's not God. God is not shame. And two, if you're heartbroken, that was not his heart towards you. He wants to mend that and run to the Father because he loves you. He really, truly does. Um, but it took me a long time to understand that too. But he can
Yeah.
handle it.
Yeah. I really, really love what you just said because I think too often we feel like it's wrong if we are angry.
Yeah.
It's wrong if we're shaking our fist at God and are mad about something happening in life like that we should never be in a place like that. But it's reality. And then if you feel like it's wrong to be angry, then shame is going to come on you. And so you're going to have the opposite effect that you want to have happen in your life. And, we go through that, it's on the grief will last through the night, the crying, the weeping will last through the night, but the joy comes in the morning. I mean, it's Jesus recognizes, God recognizes that, of course, we're human with human emotions and anger is certainly one of them, or disappointment or sadness or grief, whatever. And it's okay. It's okay to feel those things. It's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel helps, right? Knowing that you don't forever have to live in that feeling.
Yeah.
You don't have to live in anger or fear or or grief, but that you can get on top of those things.
Yeah. 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 And seek help.
Seek help. Right.
He can handle the anger, but seek help. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This has been so good.
Yeah.
Just because you're wise beyond your years. And I think when you go through things, wisdom comes.
It
And
does.
so, yeah. So it's once in a while I see people that seem to just kind of float through life. I don't know if you know anybody like that, but
Do.
man, yeah, it's like, does anything ever happen in your life? Like, go you, but holy cow. And I think there is a richness to life that when you go through some hard times, you can relate to people in a whole different way who are going through the same thing,
This
going
is
through
so
the
true.
same thing that you're going through or that you've gone through. And so there can be incredible ministry and help on the other end of it. And, like nobody understands being a widow like a widow.
Mhm.
Nobody understands being a parent who's lost a child like a parent who's lost a child.
Yeah.
And so to go through the things that you've gone through and decide to use it to not just be the best you can possibly be, and your relationship with God just blow up and increase, but to use it to help other people. I admire that so much,
Thank
that
you.
that you've got this heart to give and this heart to share, and you're doing it in some different ways. You're doing it through your words on social media. You're doing it in your book. And so where can people find you? Where can people reach out to you, follow you, see your beautiful
Yeah.
face every day?
Yeah. So my biggest platform is Facebook, and you can find me there just under Celeste Sowder. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't post a ton there, and then Instagram and TikTok, and it's all under the same name, Celeste Sowder. And then my company, we have other things going on. It's called the Soul Sister Project. So it's on all of the platforms too, other than TikTok, I believe. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you're easy to find. Sowder isn't Sowder isn't a real common name. Celeste
Nope.
isn't
And Celeste
common.
isn't either. I think that
Nope.
might
So
be the only
Celeste
one.
Sowder. Yeah. So yeah, so you're easy to find. And of course, we'll have all the information in the show notes and whatever too, where people can reach out to you and find you. And so thank you again for being here. I appreciate this so much. I wish you love and peace and joy. And thank you all for joining us today. And until next time, be blessed.